Good afternoon, everyone. It is now 3:05 p.m., so we're going to go ahead and get started. Councilman John Bullock, Chairman of the Finance and Performance Committee, joined today by a member of the committee, Councilmember Felicia Porter of the 10th District, and also joined by Councilmember Odette Ramos of the 14th District. Our fabulous staff to the committee, Marguerite Curran, is also with us as always. We have representatives from the mayor's office, from the city council president's office, and the finance department, and also we have our representatives from the Department of Housing and Community Development, which will be our topic for today. So we do want to go ahead and be respectful of time and get started. The first item on our agenda today is Resolution 240230R, informational hearing for inclusionary housing implementation and oversight. And so obviously we're calling on Department of Housing and Community Development to provide updates on the program and also any explanation of any delays, the timeline going forward, and then also the permits for projects that are already in process, as well as the high performance tax credit. So before we do get going, I do want to give some space and time to the sponsor, Councilmember Ramos, for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for scheduling this hearing today. I think it is timely considering that we passed the inclusionary housing legislation and the tax credit almost a year ago, and I would say 10 months ago. And so this hearing is just to get an update on where we are in terms of implementation. We had some timelines in the bill to have the inclusionary board already appointed by now, as well as the regulations promulgated. And so just have some questions to just make sure we're still on task with making sure that the bill is going to be implemented in a timely fashion, and also understanding if there are any developments that have not been able to that we're trying to get built and would normally comply with the inclusionary housing law, but because it hasn't been, the regulations are not finalized yet, whether that hasn't been able to, that project isn't going to have to comply. So just to get an update on where we are, we do have members of the coalition here to listen in, and I want to thank DHCD for taking this on and for all the work that you're doing on this moving forward. So I look forward to getting a very detailed public update on this so that everybody's on the same page where we are and how we can help as a council if there's more guidance needed and help needed on this. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
No, and thank you, Councilmember Ramos, for just being a staunch leader on this issue. I know it's been something that's been of concern to many of us for years, so appreciate your leadership. And then as you also referenced, appreciate members of our citizenry who are here today who've also been advocating on this front. Before we go to the commissioner, I do want to at least make reference to our agency reports and make sure that all of our agencies stand by these reports. So from Law Department, we have favorable. From Finance, there are some comments. Do we want to go ahead, Finance, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Gabriel Stewart-Sykowitz from the Finance Department. We stand by our report and ready to answer any questions that you have. I also have Johanna from our office as well to answer more questions.
Thank you very much. We see Department of Planning is favorable. DHCD was here as no position, but we'll hear from you in depth. Housing Authority defers to DHCD, and the City Administrator, none of today. And then also we have the administration before us. Would you like to have some comments before we get started?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Tyler Schnella, and I serve as the Mayor's Legislative Liaison to the Baltimore City Council. Today you will hear from various agencies with DHCD as the leading voice on the status of implementation of the inclusionary housing program as required by city ordinance. Before I turn it over to DHCD, I want to make one point very clear, and that is that we are not behind on implementing this law. The bill was passed by the City Council on December 4th, 2023, and signed by Mayor Scott on January 9th, 2024, with a 180-day enactment period. This means the bill took full effect on July 21, 2024. However, our agencies did not wait for the effective date before taking action. Preparations for implementation begin well in advance, and you'll hear more details on those efforts from the agencies. Regarding the Inclusionary Housing Board, which was established by this legislation, I want to clarify for the public that it consists of 10 members, 4 members appointed by the mayor, 3 by the council president, the housing commissioner, planning director, and director of the Office of Equity and Civil Rights, also serve as members. As of today, the mayor has made 3 of his 4 appointments. Margaret Allen, who represents a lender or investor with experience in multifamily projects and public financing. Monsieur Abdul Malik, who brings experience in housing, community development, planning, social services, and public health. And Mr. Chris Mfume, a for-profit developer with experience in public financing. Ms. Allen and Mr. Malik were both confirmed on September 16th, and Mr. Mfume will be confirmed at the October 21st meeting of the council. The mayor's 4th appointment will be a renter earning an income at or below 60% AMI, and the application for that seat is posted in accepting applicants. The mayor's refrain on this issue has been consistent since he was a member of the council. He has repeatedly emphasized that as a city, we have a moral imperative to provide safe, affordable housing in all parts of Baltimore. Access to housing often determines whether a family can achieve security and success or face the most severe impacts of historic disinvestment in our communities. Strengthening our inclusionary housing system to support this effort is simply the right thing to do. And the mayor is deeply grateful to the advocates, the sponsor of the bill, and our other council partners who champion the cause. During Mayor Scott's first term, the administration has taken significant steps to address housing issues. In October 2023, Mayor Scott signed the Councilmember Mary Pat Clark Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act into law, which gives renters the first opportunity to purchase their homes if the landlord intends to sell, and it protects tenants from unreasonable price increases during the process. The mayor also spearheaded efforts to remove owner-occupied homes from the tax sale list, helping longtime residents stay in their homes. To date, Mayor Scott has committed $193 million in ARPA funding to various housing initiatives. These initiatives include the creation of new affordable housing, housing services for the homeless, such as rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and shelter services, and support for renters and homeowners, including payment assistance, utility assistance, housing counseling, and legal services and repairs. Just 2 weeks ago, Mayor Scott stood alongside Council President Mosby to announce the introduction of a first of its kind affordable housing tax increment financing, also known as a TIF, legislation aimed at targeting vacant housing in Baltimore. This TIF legislation consists of 2 bills, one establishing a TIF district and other authorizing the issuing of TIF bonds, and it is a cornerstone of Mayor Scott's $3 billion vision to eliminate vacant housing in Baltimore. This plan, crafted in 2023, was obviously drafted in partnership with community leaders from BUILD and the Greater Baltimore Committee. Additionally, this upcoming Monday, Mayor Scott will sign the Strengthening Renter Safety Act into law, which introduces stricter inspection requirements, prioritizes safety in larger rental dwellings, and bolsters the city's ability to hold landlords accountable for violations. The administration worked closely with the bill's sponsor to ensure it reached a point where it can and will be effectively implemented by the city. And in closing, while today's hearing focuses on the inclusionary housing program, I want to emphasize that under Mayor Scott's leadership, this administration is steadfast in its commitment to actualizing affordable, safe, and inclusive housing options for all Baltimoreans through historic investment. We have actively partnered with the City Council on numerous occasions to advance these efforts, as evidenced by our strong support for the legislation as mentioned earlier. And the administration continues to be dedicated to ensuring that these initiatives not only achieve positive outcomes for our residents, but also significantly improve housing access across our city. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I guess we'll move on to Commissioner Kennedy or whoever's going to do our presentation. But Commissioner Kennedy, I'm sure you want to have some comments before we get started.
Good afternoon, committee chairman and members of the council. Happy to be in here today with you. I believe we submitted a presentation. Okay. Excellent. Thank you very much. So just wanted to start off by saying, as the administration clearly stated, DHCD is also firmly committed to inclusionary housing and the opportunities to access affordable units across our city in areas that otherwise would not be accessible, which is what inclusionary housing does, is it provides that opportunity and allows for persons that would not normally have access to some of our market rate developments to have access to rent in those locations. We are extremely committed to inclusionary housing, to advancement of the law, and to holding our development community accountable for what they need to do, as well as, more importantly, and I think under the essence of ensuring that we are doing the outreach, the education, and the work that needs to be done to attract residents that would sometimes fly under the radar and not normally have access to these, have access. Got it, okay. So we're taking the requirements to stand this up seriously. We have been actively moving on this, and we'll continue to kind of show what work has been happening and where we are. And also just want to remind everybody that the inclusionary units themselves are driven by the market and the market conditions. And we can't predict where they will be, when they will come online, but we're working here with you. So next slide. This is just some of the items that we're going to talk about as we move through, kind of 5 main points, which follow the items that were outlined in the resolution for the hearing today. Next slide. So in terms of status, you'll see kind of next slide, what we've done and where things have been moving. We've had different working group meetings. We've also been meeting with the Inclusionary Housing Coalition. We actually had a meeting with the CDN Inclusionary Housing Coalition this morning as well. Next slide. And just want to overall also be clear, I'll reiterate what the administration stated, is that there haven't been any delays in terms of being able to implement the law and hold persons, entities, developments accountable for producing inclusionary housing units. Next slide. The regulations, as we go into kind of the rules and regulations, they were posted for public comment, next slide, during the first available public posting after the enactment date of the law. So the rules and regulations could not be posted for public comment as required before the enactment date. So the first available posting was the August 15th date after the law became enacted, and those have been posted. We had those open for the 30-day period of time. We've reviewed those comments. We've received over 100 comments just on the rules and regulations from both individuals, organizations on those, and we've been reviewing those. We're discussing suggestions. Some of those suggestions we've taken to the law department for discussion, and we're expecting to then repost again, for public comment as well. I just want to be clear too that we can hold developers accountable. We can require the inclusionary plan. Everything is still happening even while the rules and regulations are being promulgated. So that does not prohibit us from enforcing the law. We've worked through this with the law department. That was one of the key things that we had to work with them on, is get an understanding of the enactment date, rules and regulations, but the laws I'm slamming into the microphone. The rules and regulations are enacted, the law is enacted, there's a time frame. Even without the board being fully seated, we are able to also still hold persons accountable and require the inclusionary housing plans, et cetera, as required by the law for projects that would meet the requirements of the law. We also created draft program guidelines and kind of a program manual that provides additional levels of detail, resources, and information for the parties that are responsible for creating the units and having the units available and ensuring that we get the people into the units. The program manual and the program guidelines actually are able to go into way more detail and provide way more information than the rules and regulations. So that was the other component of just moving forward, kind of what could be in the rules and regulations, what was appropriate for the program guidelines, and moving that forward. We also posted the draft program guidelines for public comment as well, and received public comment and additional information on those, and we'll be working to take that through. You know, also during this time, while working through these things, draft program guideline, draft program manuals, we also have been creating the online application portal, which will be through our Neighborly system, which we use for pretty much outside of like permits. We use Neighborly for all of our applications for services and programs within the agency, and it's a great way to have that and for us to be able to track, run reports, et cetera, from those applications. And we also have been developing the public dashboard, the public facing dashboard to track progress on this, and we'll have that up and running for a draft to kind of share and get comments on in November as well. And we also are in the process of drafting the annual report, the template for not just the DHCD annual report that's required to be submitted, but the annual reports that are required to be submitted by the projects themselves. Next slide, please. So Inclusionary Housing Board, we included this as an update as well. Next slide. As the administration noted, the two confirmations, the nomination of that should be confirmed within several weeks, and then the application is open for the tenant at 60% of area median income, which is also advertised on the boards and commissions website. Next slide as well. Talking about building permit applications, next slide. So this was one of the components in the resolution for the hearing. I just want to be very clear. There have been no permits that have been approved since the enactment date. And we, the team, Stacy, Deputy Hessler, have worked together, and they've been running biweekly reports, looking for specific projects that would be over 20 units, and then trying to see where they would fall. And we've also, you know, been having conversations and dialogue with some of the developers, you know, to educate them about the law's requirements. We've actually been, we've received questions directly, and Stacy's had several meetings, which she is a trooper for moving through all of this. On several of the meetings with developers, asking questions, especially around some of the developers that have affordable units already in them. They're affordable, but they're not receiving any subsidy, and so forth, and what, if any, impact would be on those projects, and how to make things work. And we've, you know, been just having those conversations, going over requirements, what would be expected, asking, you know, we've received public comments on the program guidelines and manual, also having conversations about very specific questions, and we're addressing the public comments, but people have been there. So, you know, just want to be very clear, we have not approved any permits for any project that would be required. We do believe that there are a couple of projects that that could be potentially fall into, and one of them is in the process of reviewing what would be needed for their inclusionary housing plan, et cetera. But so far, there has not been any applications, or we've gotten to the threshold point where an inclusionary housing plan would be needed. Based on what we're seeing right now, and even with kind of where it is, even that project, most likely, if that project were to continue to move forward at a building pace, I would think that we'd still be at least a year to a year and a half before any units would actually be available for that project if it were to go. Next slide. And thank you. Thanks very much to the chairman as well as Councilman Ramos for having us come and just share the public update on where we are and what's been happening. There has been a lot happening behind the scenes to move it forward. We also have the ability to just modify the program guidelines at any time. So that's the other thing. We know that these are draft, but as everybody is learning and figuring it out, we might have some changes to the guidelines. Like I said, we're still reviewing the guidelines and the rules and regulations. We're taking in all of the public comment, and we're working through that. We're expanding our outreach efforts. And we also have some draft guidance that we've had conversations with AIA Baltimore that they would be sharing as well, so that this isn't just on, because persons that apply for permits range, and it's for a project. Sometimes it's the architect, sometimes it's the builder, so it ranges, and we want to ensure that everybody has the information so that they know what is required when they make that permit application, as well as when they're taking projects, even backing up from permit application when projects start the process with the Department of Planning or go to Site Plan and Review Committee, et cetera. We also, this is something that we've had significant conversations with the CDN Inclusionary Housing Coalition. We are in agreement on this. We did not include it in the program manual draft program guidelines because we had not gotten to a point yet in conversations where we felt we could do that because we hadn't figured out the mechanics and the entity. But we are in the conversations about a partner organization that would help manage a centralized application intake where I'm a resident, I meet I believe that I meet the guidelines to qualify for an inclusionary housing unit. I would submit my application to this organization. They would do the income verification and the initial screening and basically create a pool of applicants that were already had their income verified based at that time. And then as projects came online and as leasing agents and family developers and management companies needed to find their inclusionary housing tenants, they could go to the centralized intake and screening portal and work on getting a list of potential tenants to then work through to do that. So we're in that process. We agree with the coalition. It's just we weren't at a stage to be able to include it in the draft component while we were working through who, what, when, how much. And another piece that we've had conversations on with the coalition about is our concern. I think we all share a general concern as well about how to also manage public expectations about this and have some of that education and outreach happening even before it's just, oh, here, the inclusionary housing application portal is open and now we have 15,000 people that apply and think that there might be a unit, and in 2 years, 5 units become available. So we really want to make sure that we work together, and this is, I think, an area where collaboration with the council will be important, is that we work together as we formulate the communication pathways, the communication materials, and work with the entity that we hope to be putting together the screening, centralized screening portal, to really be able to communicate what someone should expect by submitting an application for this. And I think that's something that's difficult to manage people's expectations, but we know that when expectations aren't met, or if they have an unrealistic idea of what the expectation is, that's where people start to, get upset or get angry or get frustrated, thinking that they're getting something when it's, they could be 10 more years down the road to get something. So we just want to make sure really that we collaborate and work through those education pieces. We are going to go through a second comment period on the rules and regulations. We're just wanting to take in all the comments. We've asked some of the persons that have provided comments, our organizations, to provide clarifying information on those comments to help guide us a little bit more. And then we would be working with legislative reference to work through the next timeline for those. And it is a posting typically on the 15th of a month, and then a 30-day period there afterwards. And I believe that covered everything that I wanted to cover in this part.
All right. Well, thank you. I will say I'll start with where you ended off, which was managing expectations. I will say, over the years, many of us have been disappointed with the low number of units that have been developed over time. And as you kind of went over this process in terms of the market, in terms of what it looks like, in terms of getting these projects online, you kind of gave us a sobering sort of view there. So I do appreciate that. As challenging as it can be, I can appreciate that. I am curious, though, you had mentioned some of the feedback and some of the conversations you had with the Community Development Network, the Inclusionary Housing Coalition, and then also in terms of developers. I'm curious in terms of what questions you're getting from developers, and then also what, other than what you've already mentioned, other feedback that you're getting from folks in the advocacy community, whether it be the Community Development Network or the coalition.
Yeah, I'd say our conversations with the CDN Inclusionary Housing Coalition have been fantastic. They, range in terms of areas of conversation have been around just the rules and regulations, some very technical legal points of what can be included and what not. We're also getting some additional legal reviews that we'll be sharing with them. Some conversations have also been around the affirmative marketing plans. They had questions about kind of our form for affirmative marketing compared to HUD's form. We went back and did another review of that, and we shared that with them this morning. We're not far off, and have some items that even that Seattle doesn't have on there that we've included. We've talked about fair housing enforcement. We're working with the Office of Equity and Civil Rights on fair housing enforcement. And then that outreach and education piece has come up a lot in terms of how to ensure that as a collective, we are, reaching those persons that would not normally be reached, and how do we get to them, and how do we let them know about this opportunity, encourage them to apply. And then on the flip side of that, we want them to be applying, but then how do we manage those expectations? So the range of conversations on the coalition have, been covering, I think, those kind of 6 to 8 main points with some overlap in them. I think some of the conversations and questions on the developer side have been about the annual reporting component, which we said, we're working on some pieces around the form. We also know that the developers are interested in having a place to pull names from for applications, and that tenant screening on the income. We think that will be beneficial to everyone, not just providing an opportunity for the residents to apply, but helping, to make sure that the connection is happening for developers as well, and property management companies.
Got it. Thank you. And I know that Councilman Ramos has some questions teed up. I don't want to check with Councilman Porter. Do you have any comments or questions? All right. Councilman Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and my colleague from the 10th. I do have a couple of, well, I have a lot of questions. On the timeline, so when we were putting this bill together, it was our understanding that, we would try to have those 180 days to promulgate the regulations so that we'd be ready by July 21st. And it sounds like that wasn't the case. It obviously wasn't the case. And so is it with the APA, maybe I just don't know this, with the APA, that the new rule now is that, and we need to know this as the council, that the rules and regulations on any bill, once it gets passed and after the enactment date, that's when the timeline start. I mean, you had been working on it already, so you were able to put the rules and regulations together for review on that. I know the APA and the way that we're doing it is, every 15th of the month or whatever, we're getting a list of all of the various regulations that are out, just as a way we're doing it in a more organized fashion. I totally agree with that. We meaning the city and DLR. And so you were able to put those regulations out there exactly on the DLR date that those were out. So it wasn't that there couldn't be, let's say somebody came to you at site review time, which is what we had envisioned, that somebody would come into the planning department and to your shop, and not necessarily to apply for permits yet, because you got to go through site review first. And then you see, oh, there's 20 units and it's market rate and you're getting the subsidy, so you got to go through this process. You would still have worked with them through the process anyway, even though that hadn't been happening. Is that correct?
That's correct. We had, so I'll confirm two things. One, we were advised by the law department and LegRep that we could not post the rules and regulations for promulgation until after the enactment date.
Yep.
And that we had been working on them, which is why we were ready to go at the first available date. And then we had been working with Site Plan Review Committee going back to, I think when the bill passed, we had already had those conversations with Site Plan Review Committee, Planning Department, Mr. Tiso, on, what to help us watch out for. And I think we created a form. Yeah, you want
Good afternoon. We have been working with the Planning Department and Mr. Tiso. We created an online pre-development form, an overview and instructions. Mr. Tiso is here and can speak to that. To our knowledge, there have not been many pre-development meetings at all, and there have not been any that would be applicable to the inclusionary housing law.
Yeah, that was my next question on that, and I want to make sure that that people understand that I don't want the lack of the fact that is not market rate large buildings being built to be attributed to this bill, because that's not the case. I think it's the market, right? They're just not building right now because we created the tax credit, which is where I'm going to go next. In order to offset the costs for inclusionary. And so I just want to try to understand that, there haven't been those types of buildings built. I mean, we're dealing with downtown. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of building going on in our city, which is really good. The PSO, lots of good things happening with buildings that are being built because they're already including some sort of affordability or are affordable housing buildings, right? So there's that part that's being done. We're seeing building being done. There's one project in my district that is stalled and it has nothing to do with this. And so I want to just kind of try to understand what that is and making sure that the administration is still saying, and we all are also saying, this is a great opportunity because you're also going to get a tax credit. You have to apply for the tax credit. It's not by right, but that there is the tax credit.
So we are definitely making sure that people know that the tax credit is there. I would say that it is too soon after the bill passed and the enactment date to confidently make a statement that there aren't any projects because of other components not related to the bill. And that's not because of that I think that's the case, but I think that it's too soon to have enough concrete data to be able to make that statement. We definitely have made it known to people that the tax credit is there, and this is the purpose, is to help offset those costs. You know, I will say that we've known on the development advocacy side that even as we were working through getting the bill passed, that there was still concern on the development side about the tax credit and the amount of the tax credit and how it play out. I can't speak to where they are now and if it has impacted, but we are absolutely making it known that the tax credit's available, that if you receive these, like this is, you're required to do this, and then the tax credit is there. And that is the purpose of it. But I would caution us at this stage, because we're only, you know.
Not even a year in, yeah.
I mean, we're 3 months out from the enactment date. So it's not even about a year in of the passage of the legislation, but really thinking about the enactment date. I think it's too early for us to broadly state that there hasn't been an impact on development. I'm hopeful, don't get me wrong, like I don't want that to be taken by the council or by members of the public, that I am coming at this from a standpoint of, I just think that the inclusionary housing bill has, you know, caused development not to happen. That's not my stance. My stance is, I think we still need to have more time to evaluate what the impact, if any, has been on market rate development, or where that's happening, or if it's impacted in any way market rate development and projects that are still potentially going to happen that have been figured out how to happen without subsidy, or the triggers that would trigger the unit. So I think we have several different things to be evaluating and looking at to determine. I think one of the things that we've talked about with the coalition group has also been, how do we measure efficacy of the program? And I think that's part of it too, is looking at, it's not just about where the unit's created, and it isn't just about our people in the units, but it's also about what persons are in the units. Are they of a marginalized population? And you know, what percentage of that is related to the other pieces? And there was great conversation today about the interconnectedness of all of this. And I think that there's also an interconnectedness related to how market rate projects are built and decisions that they're making.
I think, and this flows into the another piece about during the time that we were negotiating the bill, there was a lot of conversation about the application process for the people who want these units. And it was agreed at the time, because I think the department didn't have the capacity, and maybe it's just you found how to do this, didn't have the capacity to be the ones, you know, screening everybody. And so the development community had agreed to do that. But it sounds like there's been more conversation around an entity doing that. I agree it would be easier for everybody around if it's centralized in one place. It's better for reporting also. Because the reporting that we had come up with was based on that original idea, was that the developer would be the ones doing the application, the screening, and the marketing, and all of that. This is a better way. We don't have that in the bill, but we also made the whole thing broad enough that we could still do it. So I think the evolution of that conversation is very interesting, but it also goes into saying, like, here's the requirements. If you already are getting subsidy on this project, we're gonna try to make it as easy for you as possible. You know, and that's where I'm going with this, is like, we're asking for this to be done, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for folks to do it. We're gonna pay for the difference between the market rate rent and the affordable rent, and we're gonna help you with, we'll do the screening, the collective we, whoever we decide, are gonna help with the screening and the marketing, so that the developers don't have to do that. And that's a really important evolution of the conversation that wasn't happening during negotiations.
I do want to point out a couple things. One, the centralized screening does not replace the requirement of the developer management company project entity to do affirmative marketing. So I just want to be
oh no, because it's in the bill. They have to do it. Yeah.
So they still have to do that. And I also do want to state that, you know, the program guidelines, and so we've taken as an agency a very clear stance that, and sometimes I think it's perceived as being quote unquote pro-developer, when really what we're looking at is that this is pro-inclusionary housing. This is how can we help ensure and that the developers are able to do what they are required to do under the law, for us to hold them accountable and to make it easy for them to be held accountable. Why would we pass a law and sign a law with just to make something difficult to hold someone, which then makes it more difficult to enact and to implement and to operationalize, which then goes against the intent that we all agree on, which is that we need to create these units to provide opportunity for people. So our working on the program guidelines, having those conversations, like, we know that through the centralized screening process, through the affirmative marketing, through the outreach, the education, that as an agency and a city that we will do with all of our partners, that we will find the people to apply for the units. I think it's a bigger concern of making sure that we have the projects that are able to understand what it means to create the units, to comply with the requirements of the law in the process of creating those units, and the reporting requirements of that, which benefit all of us. And I do think that sometimes it comes across as pro-developer, but this is like, this is...
You're trying to make it work.
We're trying to make it work, and a big piece of this working is that the projects are able to be built, they're able to be reported on, they're able to, you know, do what they need to do, and collectively also we're able to find the residents to apply, you know, for the units, and that they're there and that pool is there.
And thank you for walking us through that. And I know there's some technical pieces there, and I know it's not an easy lift. I know Councilmember Porter has a question as well.
I do. I wanted to kind of go back, Commissioner. In your presentation, I was just looking, it's a lot of status updates, which I'm appreciative of. Can we have some finalized dates on when, you know, the processes and the procedures will be done, so that we do have some sort of clarity for this particular commission, so that we can share with the community?
I would be hesitant at this moment to give an exact date, because there are a couple of pieces. We, to my knowledge and understanding, the members of the Inclusionary Housing Board that were to be appointed by the City Council president have not yet been nominated.
Do we have an idea why?
I don't have an answer to that.
And is the council president's office here? Yeah, why haven't they been nominated yet? Can you come to the mic, please, sir? Thank you. I just want to make sure that we're talking in actual facts as opposed to hypothetical, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
What I found out this morning was the staff person who was responsible for following through on the council president's, on the people that the council president identified. In some cases that person couldn't reach the people, or the people weren't responsive. The one person that was in the process that did apply eventually pulled out. And so the council president thought, of the three, he thought one had been settled on, but apparently that individual pulled out of the process.
Will it be completed by the end of the term?
That's a good question. Don't know.
If we can have a response to that question, if we can have a week or so, I would like to actually make that an official committee request to have a response.
Okay.
If it's going to be, so it's two things. One, if it's going to be done by the recommendations, are going to be recommended from the council president's office by the end of the term. And number two, where we are in the process of nominating additional people to serve in those respective roles. Thank you. My second question, Commissioner, actually goes back to the community education, the community sharing of the availability of these units. Walk me through how community members, developers, and also just even like the council's office really will know the availability of these units. We have multiple projects that are happening all across the district. In my district alone, we have 3 projects that are, specifically geared towards affordable housing, but that was through a negotiation through not only the community, but also like my office and the developer as well. So how can we know to understand when those availability of those units will come? If there are any projected to come like in the next 6 to 12 months, we want to make sure that people are financially getting set so that they can move into these units.
Yeah, and I want to take a step back and also kind of finish some of the answer on question 1, is that while I don't want to at this point give a date for when we will be finalizing the rules and regs, because the rules and regulations, it does call for the board to review those. But I want to be very clear that the program is active, that there's nothing prohibiting us from implementing the program now. We've worked with the law department. So if a project comes in that meets the requirements and needs to submit its inclusionary housing plan,
Yes.
et cetera, all of that is still happening
Yes.
and will happen.
Yes.
It's not like there's a date when we will be ready to do that work, or
Yes.
that there's a delay in being
Yeah.
able to do it. So I just want to be very clear that
But I
it
want to
is
stretch
happening.
I want to stretch our mind there, because even though the process is there, I think what we as a council and why that law was enacted was so that there's some compliance and enforcement to that respect. And so that let me clarify, that's what I'm really looking for. So the enforcement and compliance capabilities to that already existing process, when will that be in place?
we can enforce and hold people accountable for compliance now. We can enforce we can enforce
Yes.
the requirements under the law now, and we
Okay.
can force compliance with the law now.
Now,
Yes.
okay. Have we seen any cases, and Mr. Chair, this is my last question, have we seen any cases of non-compliance with any projects throughout the city?
No, because we haven't received any, there have been no permits that have been issued for any
Okay.
project that would have to comply.
Okay.
And we are in conversation with the one project that we have found that has submitted a
Yes.
preliminary permit that may have to comply, and we're talking with them. We've shared the program guidelines, what would be needed for the inclusionary housing plan, et cetera. So
Okay.
there is nothing that is,
There's nothing prohibiting us.
there's nothing prohibiting us from enforcing and holding people accountable, enforcing compliance for the law.
So that would go into my next question about the publicity of these types of programs to actual developers. I find it very, and I'm just speaking out loud here, I find it very odd that given that we have a housing crisis, that we don't have more applications in this particular program, or at least some sort of interest in the program. So it goes to my next question about like, how are we sharing this with
So
developers?
I want to remember that the application isn't an application for this program. The application is a permit application just to build a market rate building that is over 20 units and that is receiving public subsidy. So it would be a permit application for a project, a market rate project that meets the thresholds in the law for what would then trigger them to have to comply with the law. And that's what I was saying in my response to Councilman Ramos of, I don't think that we can, at this time, given that we're 2 months in or 3 months from the enactment date, we cannot evaluate at this time if the inclusionary housing law has impacted the cadence of, or the development of market rate projects for submission. We also believe that there are some projects that might have been looking to submit, but are still then trying to figure out maybe financing structure and so forth. But I just
Okay.
want to be clear that this isn't that a project applies for an inclusionary housing
Yes,
program.
this is already in the permit process.
It's in the permit process.
So-
When you, the trigger for review and enforcement and compliance is that site plan review and then the permitting.
So I have additional questions because I know of 2 projects in the district that are well over the 20 unit mark for market rate housing, and they're still building their financial structure. Why are they not? I haven't heard anything to the office about these 2 particular projects that I know are going on.
What,
So Cherry Hill, they're building Cherry Hill Development Corporation and Development Commission, no, Cherry Hill Development,
the community,
yeah, community,
yep, yep,
they
yep.
are building 150 market rate homes for their project.
So there's also a different, this is multifamily, so if it's single family.
These are not single family,
Right,
so these
is
are,
it-
yeah,
And if they have not yet gone to site plan review, and if they have not yet received their building permit,
okay,
then when they go to site plan review, when they go to apply for the building permit, the review will happen. Is it over 20? Are they receiving another subsidy that, a major subsidy that triggers it?
Yes.
And then they would be required to comply
Okay.
with the inclusionary program.
Okay.
And they would be required to provide the percentage of units as inclusionary units, to do their inclusionary housing plan,
Okay.
to do their affirmative marketing,
yeah.
et cetera.
So is it fair to say, and I want to go back to your previous point at the opening, is it fair to say that if we come back to this particular legislative oversight hearing in a year, we should have more that we are talking about in relation to this particular law?
At that point in a year, we potentially would have, I would hope that we would have some projects
Okay,
that are in a process of having submitted their inclusionary housing plan and that are looking to be built. Based off of just development in general and where we are right now, even with a project that is, we're making a determination if they have to comply, which we believe they do, that project, the units itself, we're still probably 1.5 to 2 years before the actual units become available.
okay. I
So,
can see that, yeah.
Maybe a little bit earlier depending upon the size.
Depending
but-
on the size of it.
yeah.
But even just the process that you just outlined, if we are talking about the site plan review, then we should have some sort of number.
Yeah.
Where we, like in a year, so even if they haven't broken ground, we should still have some sort of idea of,
Yeah.
how,
And-
the quantity of those.
Absolutely, and
Okay.
that will be included in the dashboard, the publicly available dashboard. And we will also put a disclaimer on that as well, that there are projects, I also want to be very clear, there are projects that go to site plan review that are never built. So, it's all, again, about managing expectations and so forth. So we will have, tracking markers that are, this was at site plan review, the projected project is X number of units. Are they anticipating major public subsidy, yes or no? This is how many would, yes, well then this is how many inclusion units projected this project could bring along. And then we would track at the next kind of stage of that, which, would be permit application, et cetera. Like, okay, did that project come in for permits? Have we required the inclusionary housing plan, et cetera?
And thank you for that. And I know we have another hearing to transition into, but before we do that, I know we want to hear from some of the folks that have signed to testify, but I do want to make sure that we get any last questions from the committee and then Councilmember Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For finance, I admittedly have not had a chance to read your finance report because I've been a little busy. So if you would let us know what the timeline is for the application for the tax credit, and kind of where that is and your coordination with DHCD to make sure that folks know that it's available. Again, the way that we structured the tax credit in the law is very different than any other tax credit that we have, which was done on purpose. That it is not a by right credit. You have to kind of show that you need it, you have to show that you need it. So I'm just curious where you are in the process of creating the regulations and also the application, and then how you're going to be working with DHCD to make sure that, and us to make sure that people know that the credit is available.
And just to clarify, is that an official request that you're making?
No, I want them to answer it now. Okay. I'm sorry. Just real quick, and then we'll move on, yeah.
Can you hear me? Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Joanna Collado, Director of the Fiscal Integrity Office in the Finance Department. And I wanted to report that the online application for the High Performance Inclusionary Housing Tax Credit is available online. It has been developed and is online available in the Finance Department. So anybody who could qualify for the credit could apply today, even though we know that they won't be applying for at least a year. We wanted to make sure that that wasn't an issue and it's being developed and available. And in terms of the rules and regulations for this credit, so the city legislation states that the Director of Finance may adopt rules and regulations for this program. Once the rules and regulations for the inclusionary housing law have been finalized, then the Department of Finance will know what is needed in our guidance for the tax credit. And at that point, we're thinking maybe the beginning of next year, we'll start developing the rules and regulations for the tax credit. And we estimate that the rules and regulations will be completed by October 1st of 2025.
So if I understand correctly, you want to, you're waiting for the DHCD to finish up their work on the regulations, and then you will develop yours for the tax credit so that it's seamless in terms of how they work together.
Exactly.
The application's online now, just if somebody wants to get into the pipeline. We know because the way that we created the credit, it wouldn't be administered until later on in the process of the development. So it's not as much of a rush to do it now. So that's my understanding of how you're doing it, yes? Okay.
Exactly, and they wouldn't be able to apply until they have rented the units, so the
That's
project
right,
must
like till
be-
later on
yes,
in the process. Like
correct.
once we get units, that's when they'll decide to, they'll work they will already work the credit into their stack if they qualify, but it wouldn't be until the unit is actually rented that they would be getting the credit, correct? Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
that they will
and-
be able to apply.
And the application is available, but that doesn't mean someone can submit it. So no one can submit an application to get in a pipeline because
There's no pipeline
there's
to
no
get into.
pipeline to get into.
Right.
And they don't have the units, like.
Right.
They wouldn't submit the application until they had all of the information to
Of
be able to
course.
submit.
Yeah, but I think it's still important that we're putting it out there that it is an opportunity, because when people look and say, oh, you've got to follow all these things, well, here, you've got a tax credit here. So, so I appreciate that you did it that way. And I just wanted to make sure that we had that dialogue publicly so folks knew what was happening with the credit, which I get doesn't come till later on in the process.
Exactly.
So, okay, thanks very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And then looking at the folks who have signed up to testify, I see Matt Hill and I see Tisha Guthrie. So we'll start with Hill and then Guthrie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Matt Hill. I'm an attorney.
Hit the button on the right. It'll light up for you.
All right.
There we go.
Been a while since I've been here. Thank you. Again, it's Matt Hill, attorney at Public Justice Center, part of the Inclusionary Housing Coalition. I want to first just to thank the department for meeting with us and addressing many of our concerns. We appreciate the dialogue. 2 points to make. First, big picture. We all know the intent here is to create more racially and economically integrated housing units. I worry, based on my experience working in Baltimore County on a 10-year consent voluntary compliance agreement, that if we don't hold developers accountable, that the path of least resistance is to fill these affordable units, frankly, with predominantly white recent college grads who would be financially eligible. So I really appreciate the focus on being more intentional and making the process very focused on getting the middle-class Black folks and persons with disabilities and persons with vouchers who are intended to be the beneficiaries of this law actually into the units. And I think there are ways that the department can do that through these regulations. I think the centralized intake process is important, the robust affirmative marketing requirements, and then the transparency and accountability around reporting. So just keeping the focus there and making sure we get the devil in the details right is really important. And then secondly, I just want to call the council's attention to one piece of the law that you passed, which says that if the developer gets additional subsidy, they have to make up to 5% more of the units affordable. And that's a really important part, because I think there are sources of additional subsidy out there, either from DHCD, maybe it's from HABC, maybe it's from another pot that could be used for that purpose. Now, the department's taken the position, based on some advice from the law department, that that's totally voluntary for the developer. That if the developer doesn't want to take the additional money, they don't have to do the other 5% of the units. That was not the point of the law. The law is very specific. If they're offered the money, they need to take the money and do the units. What's the point of putting that in the law if it's totally voluntary for the developers? So we hope to continue the dialogue with the department, with the law department, and to frankly change their minds on that, because otherwise that's just not going to be an effective provision of the law. So thank you for your time.
And thank you for raising those points. Is Ms. Guthrie still here? I know I saw her. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Again, thank you for this informational session. And I really want to thank Councilperson Porter for her really directed questions that are really kind of holding us to account. One of the things I wanted to address is the importance of a timely nomination and seating process for the Inclusionary Housing Board. You know, the board can really act as a strong think tank and can offer some real, not just kind of oversight, but also some very important, covering maybe some blind spots that others don't have the capacity to see, ensuring that the board is diverse. You know, we do already have those representing finance and development already nominated and confirmed. And we really want to make sure that once things really do get rolling, that we have a board that can work collaboratively, that has rapport with one another. These things are very important, and that they are able to function optimally so that this law can produce what it really needs to produce. And I know a board has limited capacity to, to enforce, but it's important that all parts are optimally functional. The second thing I want to address is the oversight, the outreach, and the education portion. We have really missed some marks here in this city and really statewide, but our focus is here in Baltimore. There are a few people in here who worked really hard to get the source of income discrimination law enacted. My predecessor, Matt Hill, worked for over 10 years to get a statewide bill. It took almost 20 years to get a statewide bill. And we finally had one passed here in Baltimore before we got the statewide law passed. There are lots of renters who still don't know that a landlord has no rights. It is illegal for a landlord to deny them the opportunity to apply for housing based on them having a voucher, based on them having a veteran's voucher, or whatever their source of income. This is because we did not do our due diligence with outreach, with education, and informing the community. We have got to make sure that we do a better job with this law. Otherwise, it's null and void. If people don't know that programs are out here, if they don't know their rights and know the capacity to access resources, it's as if they don't exist. So we really need to make sure that we're using all of our resources. We have social media, we have all sorts of mediums to make sure that we're getting information to those people who are most in need of the information. So I hope we're really thinking about doing things differently and using as many resources as possible and talking to, making sure that community is engaged. Community is our strongest resource. Those people who work day in and day out to meet their needs, they have great resources, they have great ideas, and so we need to make sure that we're in community and that we're doing our due diligence. Thank you all for your work.
No, thank you, and I'm so glad you raised the source of income discrimination bill. I'm happy to be a part of the council when we were able to pass that, but it was a serious fight as well. Let's move on to see Argentine Craig. And then we'll hear from Ms. Betty Bland Thomas after that.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Yeah. It's a privilege to be here with you, council people, doing the work of democracy. I rejoiced in January 2024 because in your wisdom and in your intention, we passed legislation about inclusionary housing. And I rejoiced because I felt that we were on the right path to making available, not beyond the concept of housing for all, but actually a program, a law that would enable the citizens of Baltimore City to have a decent, affordable, clean, protected place to live, to work, to get an education. Well, and I had hoped, and I'm born under the sign of Libra, so you know that's our thing, hope and social justice. That by my birthday, which happened in October, my 88th birthday, I would be praising the work that the coalition, the Inclusionary Housing Coalition, had achieved. Well, my birthday, October 2nd, 2024, arrived, and I didn't have a present. I didn't have the law implemented. I didn't have one shovel in the ground to build one inclusionary housing unit. So I stand before you today. I am not pleased with the pace of production for inclusionary housing for low-income and moderate income people, citizens of this state. They deserve better. And I urge you, in all your power, representing the city of Baltimore, and you each do, there are 14 of you, that makes up your collective. Well, there are over 20 of us in the coalition representing thousands of citizens who are waiting for you to produce, to implement the law that was passed, that you passed in January 2024. And though I'm aiming for 100 to be around here in the city of Baltimore. I've been here for 52 years already. I am aiming to reach 100, but I can only do that if my heart and my hands and my soul is not rewarded with a place for my fellow citizens to live, to work, to educate. So I really implore you, Commissioner, and you, members of the Baltimore City Council, to move with swiftness. I look at your clock every time I come here to talk with you. That clock isn't working. And I think that's a metaphor for being behind time. That clock has not been telling the correct time any time that I've been here just to meet with you. And is that a metaphor for being, No, I hope not. But speaking metaphorically, it really does send the message that we are late, and we're overdue to act. And I urge you to act and helping us to implement this. Thousands of Baltimore City citizens are waiting for you.
Well, Ms. Gregg, I'll say, my fellow Libran, I'm prayerful that by our next birthdays on October 2nd and on October 6th, 2025, that we'll have some more units. I think we're all that same sentiment. We want to see the progress as well. So thank you for sharing.
All right. Oh, I'd love to hear that.
Amen.
And happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Betty Bland Thomas, please.
Afternoon. Hello, everyone. Excuse my voice. I have a bit of a cold. I'm going to be short. How long? A famous man once said, not long. I'll say again, how long? Famous people have said, not long. But I think it's been too long. We need to get this bill enacted. I thank Ms. Kennedy for her in-depth comments. Do better. I thank you also, Ms. Ramos, for all your hard work that you've done on this committee. Do better. Felicia, your questions were right on point, but do better. And I say to myself, do better. I can no longer sit by and just wait for you all to do better. I'm also putting that challenge to myself to do better. There are children who are living in very dangerous situations because their community is not very well enforced for safety. Their housing is deplorable. You would think that they live in a third world country. They live in the United States of America. They're fighting mold. They're fighting windows being broken. They're fighting heat not being on. And in the summertime, they fought no air conditioning. They're fighting poor schools. And they're also fighting for better neighborhoods. We have a responsibility as people to do better. And I think we have to do better. And if we have to do better, meaning hurting some people's feelings, I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Good to see you. Yeah. But we have to do better. So I say today is October the, what is it? At October the 17th. I would like to see if we meet at the second read, some accomplishments where we've done better. There should be no excuse for having people in inclusionary housing on this board. And I know we have many ample professional people who can well represent. Let's do better. How long? Not long. We can do better. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last person we have signed up is Claudia Wilson.
I'm just going to make it short. I'm Claudia Wilson Randall. I am the Executive Director of the Community Development Network. I want to thank everyone in this chamber for their work to get the inclusionary housing law passed, but we gotta move with greater speed and greater urgency. I understand also the technical part, and I really appreciate the discussion with the department about the technical parts of the bill and getting this right. But it's a house long on fire, and we can't take this lightly. And I just also want to make clear that we have to center the interests of the people in the city of Baltimore. who work for the city, who live in the city, who've waited for a long time for opportunities for housing. We can't center developer interests in this. We have to center the people of the city of Baltimore. But thank you so much also for all of your work on this. And it's a collaboration. It's gonna take government, it's gonna take the private sector, it's gonna take the people, the great people that have been part of the Inclusionary Housing Coalition to get this right. So I appreciate us locking arms and doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Much appreciated and understood. At this point, we're also going to continue along with Department of Housing and Community Development and move on to our legislative oversight, LO 240067. And this is our agency's first quarter financial performance for fiscal year 2025. So again, Councilmember Ramos, would you like to say a few words before we get started?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this was a legislative oversight hearing called by yourself as the chair of the committee, but I appreciate being a part of the discussion. The point of these oversight hearings is to do just that, making sure that the council understands the mechanisms for how the agencies are working, but also more transparency around the budget, and so that we're having conversations around the agency and what the agency is doing. Come on, agency folks, if you haven't sat down yet, come on in. I'm gonna let them sit down for just a second. Not all the agency, but we're getting started. Come on in, come on, quick, we're getting started. I was talking to them. You're already here.
And we're pulling up your slide deck as you get seated.
Everybody's fine.
I think the transition between the two topic hearings got them all slipped.
Yep, sure. It sounds like that's what we need.
Tamara up here. No, right next to Joe. And Nicole up here. Scott. Okay.
It's fine. We're giving everybody some time.
Okay.
So Commissioner Kennedy, we appreciate you hanging out with us this afternoon and your team as well, but please.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for agency folks for being here. I do want to thank you all for everything you do. We had some of your folks at at the Keswick Fire the other day, and I greatly appreciate some of them coming back at my request. Also, it has been a tough time, but I'm glad that all of the agencies have been involved. And again, I appreciate all the work that the agency has been doing. This hearing is, a regular oversight hearing. We haven't had one like this for DHCD quite yet. And the idea here is just to look at some of the core functions of the agency and ask some questions about not just the functions, but also some of the budget items. That way we're not having these super long hearings during budget hearings. We're having a much better dialogue with members of the council and the agency. And this time we're focusing on some of the budget items that were asked for in the LO, but also looking at the operations relative to the vacant property work. We've had some questions relative to inspectors and recruitment, as well as recruitment of other staffing. And I had asked specifically for some outcomes on the fixed pricing program, as well as some of the rental programs. So the department will do an overview, and then we'll have some questions, and I appreciate everybody coming in today. We figured to do both hearings together, so we wouldn't have to do everything at the same, two different hearings. So I appreciate having the dialogue on these. And again, the idea is to just continue the oversight, be able to get our questions answered, and that way it's not all done in a compressed time frame during budget hearings. It's done in a better time frame where we can have more dialogue. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to have everybody here, and thanks again for all of your work. Thank you.
And thank you, Councilmember Ramos, for teeing that up. I'm glad to see more DAC folks coming in, but we'll turn it over to you to kick this off. So thank you.
The gang's all here. Once again, good afternoon, Chairman Bullock, members of the committee and council. Happy to be here. Alice Kennedy, Housing Commissioner for Department of Housing and Community Development, related to the LO 24-0067 for our Finance and Performance Oversight hearing. I'm here today with a number of members of the team from the Department of Housing and Community Development, including Chief of Staff Scott Davis, Chief Operating Officer Theo Ngongang, Chief of Policy and Research Kimberly Rubens, Chief of Communications Tammy Hawley, our Chief of Implementation and Innovation Mary Colleen Bittner, as well as Deputy Commissioner Eric Booker, Deputy Commissioner Nicole Hart, Assistant Commissioner Erica Yates, Deputy Commissioner Mary Correa, Chief of our Fiscal Team, Dr. Marvin Bly, Chief of our HR, Felicia Knight Davis. And we also have two more of our Assistant Commissioners, Joe Kirshner, Tamara Woods, and our Special Assistant, James Turner, as well as Stephanie Murdoch, our Chief of Legislative Affairs, is with us as well. And Jason Wright, our council team. And I've got Mary Colleen, and Stacy is still here. So Stacy never leaves us by our side. Stacy Freed, our executive advisor to the commissioner. So with that, I will get into our presentation that we have for you. Next slide. We have a total of 20 different areas that we wanted to speak with you about. These are related to general oversight, and then also the items that were specifically named within the legislative oversight bill as well. So just next slide, a reminder of the mission, our vision, and our values for the Department of Housing and Community Development. Our vision is to strive for a Baltimore where current and future residents live in safe and decent housing, in thriving, inclusive, and equitable neighborhoods. And key values for that on us are equity, inclusion, customer service, innovation, integrity, and transparency, as well as partnership and sustainability. Next slide. Grounding ourselves as well. 13,133 vacant properties, continue to lower that number. This was as of yesterday afternoon, and this morning it was 13,129, and I haven't checked while we've been in the hearing, but it is updated 3 times a day, and for us to monitor. Next slide. This covers our fiscal year, our Q1 fiscal year, some of our operational highlights. One of the key ones that we want to highlight are just our state partnership work, and the overall support that we've had for the governor's housing package. Also, the budget changes at the state, and the governor's announcement around Reinvest Baltimore. Working hand in hand with the state Department of Housing and Community Development and Secretary Day and his team. Our team is in daily contact with the state team on coordination and movement on those items, as well as working with them too on the knowing kind of who and what applicants come into their Bernie applications, so that then we know, and that's coordinated with this work as well. Next slide. Some additional operational highlights. We have issued, actually I want to check on the next slide this number, because I don't know, I think we've issued more than 98. That's what Jason's. I need to check on that. That is very low. We've actually.
In the last 3 months.
Oh, right. I am so sorry. You know, yeah.
That is.
This is the corridor, yes.
Yes, those are the numbers for the first 3 months of fiscal FY '25, so from July 1 until September 30th.
My apologies, afternoon timeframe. Looking at that number immediately, having yearly numbers, we were just looking at yearly numbers, I'm like, whoa. But we're only talking about this fiscal year and quarter one. So that's over 9,800 permits for this quarter. And I would like to just say that as of this morning, we are at 13,129 vacant properties. I just received the update that we are at 13,125 as of this afternoon. So we are down. Could be back up tomorrow because the team is actively issuing new VBNs as well out in those streets, as our Deputy Commissioner Booker would like to say. We've also reviewed and approved over 655 plans. We also installed over 16 new illegal dumping cameras. There might be a question, well, where are those cameras? I just want to remind everybody, we don't disclose exactly where those cameras are, and there are specific reasons for that. And this is a question that we do, though, get from constituents, and I just bring that up as a reminder for the council members. If you get questions from constituents as well in terms of where those are, it is just our experience that we get better results of actually catching the people and not having them move around if we can just catch them where those cameras are located. We also, continue to move forward on our vacancy work, like I said, with Mayor Scott, Build, and the Greater Baltimore Committee. Next slide. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the operational highlights for our code enforcement inspections team. They've conducted, just in this first quarter alone, over 37,000 inspections, and of those, 23,470 were in response to public service requests, or those 311 SRs that come in. We've issued over 1,500 failure to abate citations, specifically also focusing on some of our target neighborhoods and where we're getting those issued. The failure to abate citations, I think many of you know that for years, up until about 4 years ago, the history was not issuing the failure to abate citations within the agency. We have, 4 years ago, we started to change that, and that's now incorporated into the daily roll call and daily work of the inspectors to be issuing those FTAs. So definitely continued efforts there. We also have our vacates. This is a question that did come up. I think Councilwoman Porter asked part of this question during our, Councilwoman Porter and I think Councilwoman Conway asked a question about this in terms of our vacates work with persons that are illegally occupying vacant properties or garages or so forth. And we've been working on that in partnership with the fire department as well. We have, in the first quarter alone, we've done 54 escalated requests for vacates that also have some form of, with 93% of those actually, 139 requests as well with some form of illegal tenancy. So this is something that we have seen. We definitely, and we reported in our budget hearing back in June, when we were here in technically May, we reported that we had seen an increase in the total year number of vacates. And we do believe that, and we've had these conversations with the fire department, and this is just one of those items where we needed to support the fire department in deploying the codex with the signage on the buildings, right? That is a key component to life and safety for our first responders. It's a key component there. And it also has very easily also, in some instances, made it known to persons that this building is a vacant building. And so we have seen some increases in illegal entry to vacant buildings because it's now more readily available in terms of literally a red sign knowing that this is vacant and there. So we are partnering with the fire department, our team, our code enforcement team. Assistant Goldring is here as well, that oversees our and works on our special operations team under Deputy Booker. They have been doing a phenomenal job on coordinating these vacates. I just want to remember and remind the council, the public, anyone that watches this on a replay on Charm TV later on, that it is DHCD leads a multi-agency effort to perform these vacates. I want to make this very clear. This isn't just DHCD trying to move people out. They first conduct an investigation because we need to confirm that we do see people, that there is an entry, that we are seeing people in. We try to make contact. We have to notify them and post notice. And we coordinate Mayor's Office Homeless Services, Health Department, BGE, DOT, DPW, you name it. We contact them and work with them on this vacate because you never know exactly what you're going to see. And a key component and fellow agency on this is also BPD, fire, and in some instances, the sheriff's office. That gets us to our first quarter financial report on the next slide. Overall, this covers just looking at our fiscal year 25 quarter one actuals, which also includes commitments. So our overall fiscal year 25 budget is around 43 million. Our quarter one actuals, including commitments, is just around 10 million, which is representing about that 25% mark. So we are on track with spending as would be perceived on a quarterly basis for the agency. Next slide. Some of the HR highlights that we wanted to cover from overall, we looked at this actually from the whole year to date, not just quarter year to date, but we've filled 84 open positions in that entire time. We've participated in a number of the different recruitment events, and we are actively actually working on a partnership with Morgan State and Johns Hopkins regarding interns and intern opportunities and fellowship programs with the agency, which we think are extremely important. Next slide. So in terms of kind of just overall progress with staffing and open positions, we have, filled 414 positions, which is an increase since our budget hearing, where we were actually below 400 at that time. And our key prioritization in terms of vacancies that we're filling are the housing inspector positions, as well as our assistant counsel positions. Next slide. This continues in terms of just a different way to see where we are in terms of same time of the fiscal year 24 compared to where we are today with fiscal year 25 for our vacancy rate within the agency. Next slide. We're going to talk in terms of some of the work that we've done in development as well. We have various different programs that work here. We have received over 214 judgments for in-rem tax lien foreclosure. Like I mentioned, we continue to prioritize hiring of assistant counsel positions as well as paralegals. We had a influx of staff coming in about a month ago now, or they've been on that last cohort about 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
In the last two pay periods, we've had 10-ish people start each pay period. Yeah.
So we continue to see those priority components. The team also met, and between our HR team, code enforcement, and Chief Davis, putting together what the recruitment plan and strategy for code enforcement inspectors would be for essentially what would be this coming off of the first quarter of the fiscal year into the second quarter, because there is a cohort of hirees that is in training, and then they were staggering, kind of knowing when that training cohort would end, when to be conducting interviews, which they've been conducting interviews, because then you conduct the interviews, go through the final hiring process, and then the next cohort of trainees for inspectors would be coming in towards that end of the year, so that the cohort that's training now kind of goes out, and that next cohort of trainees that they come in. In terms of highlighting some of the areas too around just the reduction of vacant properties in the city on the development division side, we have out on the street right now the first request for qualifications for the developer registry. This is specific to 4 geographic areas that we started with on the partnership. This will expand. Broadway East, East Baltimore Midway, Coldstream Homestead Montebello, and Southwest Partnership. This is a partnership with the communities. I just want to remind everybody, this isn't DHCD putting out a request for developers and doing the reviews and so forth. This is sitting with the communities, reviewing applications, having the communities provide feedback on who they want to do work in their communities. There's 2 different ones, one for new construction infill and one for renovation of existing properties. And we're really excited about this, and the communities have been excited and providing information and feedback as well. In terms of the fixed pricing program, a fixed pricing model, we can go to the next slide and then move into the next slide after that. In terms of just an overview, our first phase was from April 1st to June 30th, and then we've been in phase 2, coming on off of April 15th, which was Charm City Roots, and then as of July 1st, which would be the beginning of the quarter, looking at just kind of seeing where normal applications. This is where we also started to process any applications that had come in before March 20th of 2024 that were kind of put on hold. We had 200 pending applications from that time period, and those have resumed processing and have been moving forward. And we also looked at the ones that came in after that March 20th date, and those included our for-profit and nonprofit developers, and started review on those. On the next slide, you'll see that as of September, we've completed 601 applications that were eligible for review. 64 of those are actually currently in the settlement process. This is for that, kind of first quarter time period. We've received 24 applications from developers, 8 applications from homeowners, 6, and I want to say developer is, that one is a for-profit developer, and then we have our nonprofit developer, 6. We also are looking at where we're getting the applications from. So of those, we have a significant number that are coming, from within the state of Maryland and not out of state as well. So we feel that is a good thing. One of the key things that we have worked with homeowners, and this was in that first kind of influx of really understanding that the persons that want to purchase a vacant property to do the rehab, the biggest component is fully understanding the costs associated with that rehab, that this isn't just purchasing a property for $1 and then, doing a DIY type of a project here, that this really is a significant undertaking. Some of the people that have applied of homeowners, as we've talked with them, kind of given information guidance, We're actually making connections with them to some of the development partners, because they're like, maybe actually I'd be better linked up to work with a development partner that could undertake this. I can work on figuring out financing or how to, purchase and have upfront money, et cetera, get necessary mortgage, and then do things that are still fun as a homeowner, picking out finishes, design, et cetera. So we're seeing that we have some people connecting with development partners, some people still needing that runway of homeownership coaching to actually become buyer ready, and looking for that. And we recognize also needing to still have that down payment closing cost assistance for the homeowner buyers, as well as the incentives to help close appraisal gaps, which actually the affordable housing tax increment financing will help support those persons that own a home, they might own a vacant property, they want to live in it as their primary residence, and we're able to provide them that funding support with the proceeds from the affordable housing TIF as well. One of the next items is the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. On the next slide, you'll see the spending plan that looks at the fiscal year 25 spending plan compared to the fiscal year 24 spending plan and what those amounts are. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund meets monthly. The board covers a significant number of topics. The agendas, there were a couple of links that we're having some problems, but those are getting fixed. But the agendas, the transcripts of those meetings, et cetera, are available online, as well as the annual reports. I will say that the fiscal year 23 annual report is actually with the outside accountant for review right now. So there sometimes is a delay in that in terms of where we go for on that, but that'll be posted as soon as that comes in as well. On the next slide, you'll see that with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we have awarded over 37 projects for the new construction and preservation of existing rental housing. This represents over $30 million out of the trust fund to support just under 1,200 units, 1,195 units being supported. A significant number of those units at 30% AMI, and a higher 675 of those at 50% AMI and below. We know as well that this $30 million is leveraging actually over $730 million when we look at total development costs of these projects across the city. Another, on the next slide, you'll see that another key line item and priority for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund are the community land trusts. We've had 21 awarded here with a total amount of $11,400,000, which supports 92 units. That leverages also an additional kind of $22 million of additional funds there. In terms of future programs, on the next slide for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, we've been also supporting the rent supplement program. So there was the Emergency Housing Rent Support Program, which is called the HOPE Rent Support Program. This is, something that has been a key component. Deputy Hart and her team have done a fantastic job of implementing this to help with emergency assistance, especially for residents that have an income that needs some help, whether or not they're coming in through our referral partners at Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, sometimes through the Mayor's Office of Employment Development, in terms of being able to help get on their feet with either the security deposit or the first couple months of rent, but it is capped. This is not a long-term rental service program, but it has been a tremendous asset to the community, and we continue to see the need here to be able to be providing this level of support for our residents. We are also looking at and evaluating with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund of a permanent housing voucher program. There is a consultant, Enterprise Community Partners is on board, that is evaluating and looking at what that program could look like and how that would be structured, and looking at both project-based and tenant-based type of vouchers. But it's at a small budgeted amount on that right now in terms of 1.5 annually, and that's one of the things. It's something that has been an interest of the trust fund board to explore this option. And we are actively exploring that. And we'll see kind of what that program looks like. How many residents would we be helping? And I think then the question also would be to review, is this a good use of those funds for the number of residents they could serve over time? I think that's still a question that we need to evaluate from the trust fund standpoint. Moving on, I think there was a question about the Community Catalyst grant program. So we've had 1.5 million in capital funds and 500,000 for our round 4 of NOFA. All awardees have been notified of their awards, but not publicly announced. We actually had to postpone the announcement last week, and that is in the process of being rescheduled for a later date in November. In terms of HUD program updates on the next slide, we do receive, in terms of the city's entitlement award package from HUD, funding for the Federal Home Investment Partnership Program funds. This was one of the items that was noted as wanting information on as part of the hearing. We have to provide, match of funds on non-federal services. These funds are used put into typically tax credit, affordable housing tax credit projects. I will say we have not had a publicly available NOFA for several years because the NOFA was done and the funds were allocated on the match for the Perkins Somerset Old Town project. That was part of the matching commitment for that project, and having the home funds be available for those affordable housing units for those projects. In the past fiscal year, we saw those two home funded, with the building of the Ruby over at Somerset, as well as the one of the projects was completed in 24, but was part of actually an award of home funds that I think was made in the fiscal year 20 timeframe, was the Woodland Gardens 2 project out in Park Heights. So we will continue to monitor. The other component, just to know, is that the home fund awards fluctuates year to year from the federal government. And we will be looking at what this looks like moving forward, and if as the Perkins Somerset Old Town and the Choice Neighborhoods grant kind of finishes out there, and there is looking at the future of what might be needed for home funds to support to support PO home redevelopment and Choice Neighborhood application there as well for our affordable housing projects. When the other piece is that we did have our home ARP funding. This was part of, I just want to be clear that our home ARP, which was the Home Investment Partnerships Program, American Rescue Plan Act, that those funds were awarded, it was $14.7 million. That is outside of the ARPA allocation of the city. So I don't want there to be any confusion during this hearing or for the public or the council that this was part of what we did. Was we took the 14.7 of the home ARP funding. Next slide, please. Thanks, Mark. We took the 14.7 of the home ARP funding, and we leveraged that with the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services and their ARPA award to create essentially a $30 million fund, which is the Housing Accelerator Fund, to support the creation of permanent supportive housing units. And that was one of the key things. The home ARP dollars actually only had 3 uses available for them, and one of those was the creation of permanent supportive housing. We have a need in the city. We worked with the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services several years ago when they were putting together a spending plan, and it made sense to couple these 2 sources of funds to create as many permanent supportive housing units as possible. We made those awards, and these grant agreements in this first quarter have actually started to make it and move. The grant and loan agreements have started to make it to the Board of Estimates for the projects noted there. Also, on the next slide, in partnership in this first quarter with the Mayor's Office of Homeless Services, as well as the Corporation for Supportive Housing, CSH, and the HAND, which is the Housing Association of Nonprofit Developers, we did the city's first Supportive Housing Institute, which was to help developers kind of move through and learn more about what it means to create permanent supportive housing units. And we were able to make $150,000 available to each of the teams that participated for pre-development funding. And out of these, we actually do believe that we should have a minimum of 20 PSH units that the projects that kind of were working through the Institute should be able to bring online. So it was awesome. That was a really just great day to kind of sit and be on the panel to hear about all the different projects, what they have been working on through the Institute, and how to put that through. On the next slide, there was a question in the oversight bill asking about pilots. I think it just said pilots. We took the assumption that it was specific to the affordable housing pilots, which we help underwrite. The affordable housing pilots are permitted by state law, specifically under property tax article section 7-503. The property owner and developer, there has to be a component in there that is a nonprofit or the housing authority of Baltimore City. And this is a key thing. I mean, a lot of these projects, there is lower rent revenue generated. It is one of those key things. And, the federal, state, and local subsidies are often needed. And in this instance, especially for us as a city, we have the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We have very limited home dollars. Like the home dollars, I also want to put in perspective, range from about $3 to $4 million a year. And with increased construction costs and increased gaps on the affordable housing projects, you're looking at needing more subsidy into the project. And this is a way that the city supports the creation of these affordable housing projects through the subsidy to make the projects financially viable, whether or not it is a new construction of a project or if it is a resyndication or refinancing of a project. The pilot is just as important on those projects as it is on the new construction because it permanently helps for the length of the time period of the affordable housing units in that project. It preserves affordable housing units. And there are key projects that are coming in for this that I will say are in an impact investment area or right on the border of an area that we are making significant investments in. And the pilot helps ensure that while the market, we've seen the market change quickly in some of the neighborhoods with investment, it helps ensure that that affordability level is there. And then rounding out on the next slide, there was information wanting on the affordable housing tax increment financing. This was introduced at City Council on September 30th. We actually last week presented at the Planning Commission. There was a favorable vote out of Planning Commission. It is 2 different bills, one that is the bond issuance, one that is the district itself. We have briefed, I think, every council person. We're finalizing the last council member briefing for next week. It's over 7,900 properties on this. It supports our small emerging developers. It also, like I mentioned earlier, can support a homeowner that owns a property that wants to renovate that property. It requires us to do annual reporting to the council, and any issuance of bonds has to go back to the Board of Finance before those bonds can be issued. And with that, that finishes our presentation for today. Thank you.
Well, thank you again for always having a thorough report, and also for your team for being here. Before I turn it over to Councilmember Porter to share the remainder of the hearing, I do have a couple points and questions. So it was very useful to have the real-time update in terms of VBNs right here in the chambers, right? That we're making significant progress on a daily basis. So I was happy to see that. And obviously, most of you know it's a significant concern of mine, given our district having about a quarter of those properties. But then also the dumping cameras, and I know we're not going to talk about the specific locations, but as you know, vacancy, dumping, and blight tend to go together. I'm curious about how effective the cameras are in terms of catching dumpers, and then also the litigation after that, but also the placement of them, not the specific locations, but it's the placement of those cameras. Is it more so 311 complaint driven? Is it hotspot driven? Is it a combination of all the above?
I'll take that one. I'll work backwards a little bit. So it is a combination of all the above in terms of placement of the cameras. It is hotspot driven, it is 311 SR driven, it is driven by our code enforcement inspectors picking up and noticing some different trends, and then working with our SIU team and making that connection for placement. Also, our SIU team also kind of, you know, it's a stealth unit out there, and they do analysis and data analysis, and they also have levels of intuition. You know, happy to also at any point in time connect if anyone wants to go and, you know, walk around or ride along with our SIU team and kind of, you know, look at some different things. Happy to do that as well. But there's a level of intuition component, there's a level of hotspot data, SRs, community complaints, council member offices, delegates, senators, elected officials, community association representatives that all kind of go into the placement of the cameras. In terms of effectiveness, I will say that shortly thereafter, we deployed the first round of new cameras. We actually were able to catch illegal dumping online, which resulted in a prosecution. So yes, they are effective and can be effective. Are they, do we receive results every single time? No. Because I want to remind everybody that we have to have very specific images captured on the cameras in order to bring the case. So if we have a truck and you can't see the license plate all the way, or you can't see the person, there's different things just in terms of the quality of the images. And that's something too where the team will also move cameras around to also try to increase the quality of the images that we get so we can make those prosecutions. The other piece I would highlight, this wasn't in the first quarter, but we did work with the Mayor's Office of Government Relations, and we worked to champion the bill in Annapolis last session that would allow us to actually post photographs of illegal dumpers and try to hold people accountable. And we're working through that right now and getting that process started.
And one other question, and I know Councilman Ramos is interested in this as well, the judgments for in-rem foreclosure. So we have, 214. Can you talk about, once you get that judgment, what are we seeing at that point?
Yep. So once we get the judgment, we work to there's two things. One, there were some that have come through that are part of some site assembly components that are some lots and some other things that, we're pulling those together, but we're actually moving, to disposition. And that is one reason also why the RFQ right now out for The developer registry is so important because the communities, what we heard from the communities is really wanting to have that group of developers that would be ready. So as we're getting the properties, they're ready to move along. We have some in that instance I can talk about too. In one of the neighborhoods we just were talking about, and this is just because it's at the forefront based off of email communication with Joe and the team, but we have properties that have come in. Cherry Hill Community Development Corporation is part of that team that's going to be working on them. They've come in and now they're, ready to go, and now they're immediately moved into Assistant Commissioner Wood's shop for that disposition component. Land disposition agreement, move to settlement, and pacing that with what the development entity wants to do. So in this instance, Cherry Hill Development Corporation will be doing, I forget if it's 5 or 6 of those, but we'll stagger that based off of if they want to go to settlement on all 5 at once, or if we're gonna hold some and they do 2 at a time. But those are part of those conversations, so.
And then the timing of that, how long a process are we talking about?
Well, we've been decreasing the time that it takes to move through the disposition process. So we've been decreasing the time, increasing efficiency. We've actually hired an additional real estate, we have additional real estate agent and have kind of restructured part of that division. So, disposition timeline and moving through, part of it is just paperwork and the other party reviewing the legal aspects, but we're in kind of like a goal of like 90 day.
Thank you. I know Councilman Reporter has a question. I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you. I'll yield to Councilwoman Ramos while we have a transition.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay. I have a couple of questions, sticking with the in-rem questions that my colleague just started with. Obviously very excited about the progress on what's happening here. I had a question about exactly how many lawyers we have and how many we are hiring. This would include the litigation, the folks that are doing the filing, as well as the paralegals, and then how many more we are hiring.
So we are currently at press the button.
What the person is. There you go.
All right.
Hi.
Yeah, I think I can field this one. Joe Kirshner, I am the Assistant Commissioner for the Legal Section. I was counting today, we have 11 attorneys right now, 7 doing in-rem, 4 doing titles, because we set it up so that we could get some efficiency by having title examinations done, right, setting up as a factory. We had 4 who started in September, so of those 11, 4 of them started in September and 1 had started in August. So that's where we are with the attorneys. We also have a current advisor who's sent over to us from the law department, who's kind of looking at our processes and helping us figure out how to improve and become more efficient. And because it's going to be a big practice, this person has a lot of experience doing that. I think the person will be a good fit, and it's my understanding that our HR department is trying to bring that person over. Yes, permanently.
Got it.
And then currently we have 8 paralegals. 1 paralegal started in August. Position-wise, and we had interviews this week and more next week. We have positions for 6 more attorneys right now and 3 paralegals, and we'll be doing interviews for the paralegals when we finish this round of interviews for the attorneys.
And of the 6, they're all going to be doing in-rem, or some of them are going to be doing title?
Yes, I think some will be doing title because we're trying to find the bottlenecks and have them addressed. Some are probably going to flex because, it's a similar skill.
Yep. Okay, great. So in an ideal world, your ideal team here looks like it would be, if I could do my math correctly, 17, 18, 19, 20 people that would be, including the one from the law department that we're going to steal, would be the in-rem team, including you, which is not in the 20.
Right, I didn't count myself.
It's more than that with the paralegals.
Oh, I didn't
It's
count the
17
paralegals. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
I
you're
mean,
right.
there's
You're right.
17 assistant counsel positions. Right now, we have an advisor. We also have a managing attorney position to fill. And then there's also Assistant Commissioner Kirschner and the paralegals.
Right,
And
so
that-
close
Which
to 30.
would be 11
Yeah.
paralegals.
And I would
at this
also
point.
say that that is the current staffing levels in terms of what has been budgeted and what the increases in staffing budget were received in the budget to have additional positions. And, we're going into another budget season. So I wouldn't say that this is our ideal sweet spot of positions, but this is where we are now, which is a significant increase from where we were. I mean, when.
No, I'm totally aware
I
that
think
that's
we
like
we had Joe and
three others
three
when we started.
attorneys.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay. And then how many do you anticipate then working through? Are you still working on your budget for requests
We're
for
still
next
working on
year?
budget
And
requests.
have you been instructed by the administration to ask for everything that you need?
We have been instructed to put in budget requests for what we need. We completed CLSs, and actually, we will know more because the budget kickoff meeting for agencies is tomorrow.
Is Wednesday.
Next Wednesday.
So the instructions for that, we will have that.
And
on
are
Wednesday.
any of the lawyers from the receivership moving over?
No.
No.
So did you move some attorneys over already?
No.
There aren't very many of them, right? There's like 3, 4.
So the
No, there's
receivership, so the code enforcement legal section, which receivership is just a small portion of what they do. There is the assistant commissioner for litigation. There is also a managing attorney. We have 11 assistant counsels, and as of Tuesday, they are all filled. And we have 9 paralegals, and I think they may have 1 or 2 openings for paralegals. So the code enforcement legal section, when fully staffed, will be at 22 people.
Right, I'm specifically interested in receivership.
The thing is, those attorneys do it all. We have
Okay.
it based on a district model. So each attorney covers a certain portion of the city. And so if there is a receivership case in the Northeast, the attorney that is in the Northeast will do that. They may also be taking, processing illegal dumping cases that happen there. We do not break it down that we have certain attorneys that just do receivership.
Are you going to change that to make it so that they're specialized in receivership, even though we're trying to lower the amount of receivership that we do?
We don't need to do that. There isn't a need for a specialization in receivership.
Okay, well, and we're also trying to rely more on in-rim than we're doing in receivership anyway, but we're still going to need receivership, for some cases. And so, okay, I've got more receivership questions, but we'll move on from there. And then my second, and first of all, thanks for going over this with me. This is what I've wanted with all the emails that I've been sending about, the staffing, is this very specific, what do we have now, where we think we're going. So I really appreciate getting this data today, which I imagine you had anticipated. My question, and then in terms of if we're going to be ramping up, we need to help the courts. ramp up as well. And I had gotten a request for trying to help them ramp up this year, which it's been clear that we can't do that till next fiscal year. Are we working with them on what their capacity is going to be for next fiscal year so that they can either add another magistrate or give both? She needs staff currently. And then we want to add, capacity. She's already at, every Wednesday hearings, which, is good. But those cases are a ream of paper that they read every single word of to be able to make sure that we're doing our part right and that, she has what she needs to go ahead and issue judgment.
Yeah, and so I've had conversations with Solicitor Thompson. We've also had conversations. Solicitor Thompson has also had conversations with the clerk of courts as well, because there's staffing there and a dedicated clerk work.
Yes.
So it is on that level of communication. I know that Solicitor Thompson and I need to recircle back in the last couple of weeks while she's been in the opioid trial.
Of course.
But it is part of, and that's also part of the budget kickoff that will happen next Wednesday as well. MOGR is also aware and has been supportive of those conversations too.
And the court's funding would come specifically from us, or can we ask for the state for some money?
So there is a way to actually, I think it's a both, from my understanding, that there's a way that the city could provide funding and then also at the state level.
Yeah, because they're
well.
performing the service, not just on our behalf, but on the state's behalf, right? Yeah. So, that's just kind of how it works. It would be great when you're ready, because if we have to go to the state, we need to do that soon for their budget. And I would imagine, given the governor's commitment that he made to us relative to vacant properties, that they would be willing and hopefully put something in the budget to be able to help us out with this, whether it's through the courts or whether it's through us or however they're going to do it. So I'm hopeful, and please let me know how I can be helpful, because this is a big deal. We want to get this done, and any and all advocacy, if it's helpful, I'll do it. And also I'm looking at the administration here, MOGR, about how important it is to get this this funding, not just for DHCD, but also for the courts. Madam Chair, I have more questions, but I'll yield.
Yep, I have two more. I have a couple of questions. All right. So just to kind of recircle us back to the vacant positions, you mentioned 84 vacant positions in your presentation. You mentioned about 30, so that's about 50 or so left. How many of those are dedicated to code enforcement?
So for code enforcement, there are, right now, we have 20 open code enforcement inspector positions. Out of those, we have 7 that are open senior inspectors. And I just want to be clear on those, that we are not active, well, I should take it back. We are actively looking to fill those positions, but those are not posted. We work to have those as career advancement for our inspectors, and they require certification. So that was part of the planning session that Deputy Booker, Assistant Commissioner Yates, Chief Knight Davis, and Chief Davis worked on in terms of the planning for that. And Deputy Booker has actually been working on his Booker Institute, I think we were going to call it.
No, I know it very well. So,
which is basically like a weekly training and prep session to be prepared for the test for that senior inspection position. They're also actively doing interviews for the open housing inspector positions. I think they had, I know the one day they were back to back. I think they had 11 interviews for those 14 open positions for inspectors. And that would be part of that cohort that would be starting more towards the end of this year.
Sure.
I don't know if they want to add anything.
Before you answer, one of the major reasons why I asked that question is because I know the intense training that Deputy Commissioner Booker does, but when they have the training, they stay here for a short amount of time and then they go to other jurisdictions. How are we, you know, how are we making sure that we keep and retain talent and not losing it to other jurisdictions like Montgomery County, given that they've had such extensive training through Mr. Booker?
Well, I think one of the key things for that to start with is the fact that we are keeping the senior positions as a career opportunity within the city, within here. So it is giving an opportunity to move and to advance from the inspector position to that senior inspector position. I know that there are discussions, and it's been brought up with Director Herbert and the Labor Commissioner. You know, these are CUB positions, so it's also not, you know, we can't just immediately just wave a wand and increase salaries either. So there are conversations that are happening at that level, which would also help, you know, with retaining and attracting. And I don't know if the Assistant Commissioner or Deputy want to add anything on retention.
No, ma'am. I think you covered it. The piece that they're working on with the additional salaries sometime in the future will help to shut the back door.
Perfect.
And we shut that back door, and then we continue to recruit on the front side. We should be able to net something.
Okay.
We only kind of forecast maybe 2 people maybe in the retirement bubble. You know, we always look to see how old staff is and when they may,
Yes,
you know,
when they may
decide to
retire.
go. So we kind of look at that and make sure that we can shore up where we might lose somebody to attrition.
Perfect. And this question is for the administration. Where are we in the completion of that labor study?
I don't know.
Oh, salary study.
So my understanding is that the salary study is near completion, is under review, but I will make sure to follow up with the committee with more specific information.
Okay. If that can be an official committee request, if we can have an answer in about a week, and then a month, or let's say about a month and a half after that, I want to see about the implementation within the respective agencies. The reason why I ask that is because I know a few of us have been asking about the completion of that study for at least a year and a half now. And so I want to make sure that we have some sort of deadline that we are working towards. And then also we have some sort of plan of execution of integration within the agencies.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. My next question has to do with community land trusts. So this is a question actually from the district. They've been hearing that community land trust is addressing affordable housing. However, issues exist with the AHTF fund limits. What is HCD going to do to help increase the subsidy limits for affordable housing?
I would just say that we are actively looking at that and have had conversations. I actually just was talking with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund team last week about this. One of the key things that we were looking at, though, is overall, though, we've made significant awards to the Affordable Housing Trust Funds, and you know, production is still extremely slow. So it has a hefty amount of awards that have been made, but very minimal spend on those awards. So we're trying to balance, you know, increase of award versus where they are in project pipeline, and how best to do and manage that spend.
So one of the reasons why I believe that this question kind of originated is as we go through the process, the cost of redeveloping these homes are going to be more expensive as the time goes on. So kind of closing that gap between the procedural aspect and then actually redeveloping the house, I think that's where they're
and there's other sources of funds available for that too. Like a number, you know, one of the key areas that we're working with as well in terms of, you know, as we do the developer registry and part of the citywide housing plan and anti-displacement strategy, the CLTs play a huge role in that. And that's also one reason why they're $1. It's $1 on the fixed pricing for the CLTs is because of the importance of that role. So also a reminder that there will also be, if the property is a property on the affordable housing tax increment bond financing, that will be another source of funding for that project. You know, we're projecting an average of $50,000 for the TIF, you know, in TIF money into a project, but that also ranges. And one of the key things, it covers that appraisal gap, but it also creates the deeper levels of affordability.
Okay.
So if we have a CLT project that's one of the affordable housing TIF properties, and we want to hit a 50% AMI on that, it might not, but the appraisal gap is only at 30. Well, we might still be putting in out of the TIF 70,000 to complement the trust fund dollars, et cetera, so we get the affordability in there.
Thank you for that. And then following up on that question, where did the subsidy limit come from? Is that based on city and state? Where's it?
That was looking historically at capacity, and also where people had capacity and how also we were able to move some of the funds to also multiple different entities, and also looking at how much we had budgeted in the spending plan for CLTs for that year, and ensuring that we could also support a number of the CLTs as well. So I think it's a combination of different components.
So it's not necessarily based on a law or anything. It's based on just a market center approach of just having the funds for many CLTs. Is there any opportunity to increase it, or any discussion to increase that subsidy?
There has been. I mean, that was part of what we were just talking about last week, is do we do a round where the subsidy limit is increased, but a smaller number of entities? But those entities, some of those entities are still haven't been spending the money that they've been awarded already.
Okay.
So we're also trying to work with them. We support financially Share Baltimore, which is the kind of learning network for the CLTs.
Yes.
And they've also been working on building the pipeline. I know I have on my calendar the ribbon cutting for the South Baltimore Community Land Trust ribbon cutting in November.
Yeah.
So I'll be there for that, and that's really exciting because that's one that we've been wanting to see, move along as well. So.
And so, just from my understanding, it sounds like not only are there issues as it relates to the cost of redevelopment, there's issues as it relates to grants management, performance, and so you all through the technical assistance are okay. Ma'am, you can go next.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. The development registry, I know this is something we've talked about for a while in terms of making sure that, particularly in the IIA areas, that there are development partners that are already working with community. And that way the disposition and the work of an RFP or whatever would actually be quicker because there's already a trusted entity that the community is working on. And I'm just kind of wondering, there are already trusted developers working in certain neighborhoods in the IIAs. So I'm wondering if those are already, if they're weighted in any way, and how that works. Because I want to make sure that, I'll just use my district as an example. The two that I know that the community association has wanted, there are several others that are actually doing work in the community, but if they're weighted in any way.
I wouldn't say that they're necessarily weighted, but what I would say is that we are reviewing all the applications with the community. So the community is going to be sitting, having representatives sitting, reviewing the applications, reviewing the partners. So especially for people that are working in the community, and if the community's like, they're in the community, they're doing good work, we're, seeing them there, then, we want to be supportive of that. And we've also set this up too to support the emerging developers as well.
That was my next
That was a
question.
really important piece. I know Assistant Commissioner Woods and COO Ngongang, you know, when we were looking at things, you know, in terms of some of the requirements, I was like, how are we ensuring, you know, I don't want, I forget how it was worded, but it was worded in a way that would imply that you had to have a certain level of experience or a track record. And I was like, we're taking that sentence out because we want to be supporting people that might have just done one. Like there's the, Mr. Morris in
Right.
one of the
We want him to
neighborhoods,
do
and
the
he's-
1600 block
he's-
of Gorsuch.
He's done one in that block, and we're supporting him and want to support him to do the others. So track record isn't something that we're also, you know, weighting heavily on that scoring and such. So I would say that we don't have a review form yet that has specific weights, so I can't say that it is weighted, but, you know, the community review process and part of that takes all that into consideration.
Okay, so it's not a, I mean, maybe weighted isn't the proper word, but I just want to make sure that they are part of the mix, that they've been encouraged to apply, that, because we don't, I mean, there's lots of people doing amazing work. And if there is more capacity to do more, then have that developer there too, but then also work with the Mr. Morris's or whoever. He did a great job on that unit, and he, you know, we've already got through NREM because we're very happy about how this is going. Most of the properties on that block finally. By the way, it only took 1.5 years. So that is such an amazing opportunity for him and for the community to be able to say, this is homegrown.
Yep.
You know, so I just wanted to make sure that was, it wasn't just to get, you know, Sierra of Maryland to do, you know.
No.
Yeah.
That is not that intent of the registry. I mean, it is, and this is being pushed out through a number of different avenues that actually support our smaller emerging developers, our women developers, our, you know, this is going out, and the community is doing a great job too of helping to get it to the people that they want to have on the registry as well. So this is.
And we want these houses rehabbed, don't get me wrong.
Oh, yeah.
Like, this isn't just a sort of fly-by-night thing. Like, we want them done.
Well,
So there has to be some capacity, or at least, you know.
Well, and that's where in conversations and where the thinking has been and where we're going and where community has seen and where we see the opportunity is that on this registry, we will know if someone has a capacity to do 5 a year or if someone has a capacity to do 50 a year, right? Or more. Or give or
And I'm
yeah.
gonna interject. Do you have another question, ma'am?
I have a few more, but I don't know if you're on a time frame. Okay. Do you have a follow-up with this one?
No, we don't have a follow-up, but however, I want to make sure that we're asking direct questions and getting responses for Margaret.
Oh, okay,
Thank
sure,
you.
Mark, I'm sorry, because here we are having a conversation, and Margaret, I'm sorry. Great, thank you. I had a couple of questions around the buy into Be More process. I will be clear, I do not call it the fixed price process because I think every property, as you've said, is going to get that same pricing whether they go through the buy into Be More website or not. So I make a distinction about whether it's a block by block strategy or if it's the buy into Baltimore strategy. So the buy into Baltimore strategy, I have a question about. I have heard that it's taking more than 2 weeks to hear from folks from your office before when somebody applies to get one of those properties. And I think when we had first talked about it, that it was going to be a 2-week turnaround. Is there process improvements that are happening, or you're just going to maybe say 30 days instead of 2 weeks, just to make sure, because you're getting so many applications? Like, I'm just trying to figure out, because people are saying, I haven't heard yet, and it's been 3 months, you know?
I'd like to check on a couple of things. So one of those, if we do remember that we had a pause, so some people hadn't heard anything because we weren't processing their application, which we had told everybody we weren't because of the implementation
Of course, right.
of fixed pricing.
Yeah.
I would not want to necessarily answer that 100% right here, because I also, and the team has also gotten emails and at meetings saying, oh, wow, this was great. I submitted the application, they got right back to me, and so forth. So if there's a specific property or a specific person or a specific address, if we could get that and look into that specific one, it also helps us to be able to pinpoint exactly what the issues and barriers are. Is it when we had someone out, was someone out of the office? Was there a glitch in the system? It really helps us to know in order to improve processes and ensure that things are being communicated, if we have specific cases to look at so that we can specifically identify what the problem is, because I think it's both ways. So I'd want to know exactly what they are so I can dig in.
Okay, I'll get some of those to you. But it is still the time that you're looking for is to be able to get back to people in 2 weeks after they submit their application.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what's the time frame once somebody, the whole deal falls through and you need to put the property back on the Buy and the Be More website? I think one of the situations that we had was that there was a constituent who wanted to get some of the lots on Old York Road, and they disappeared from the site, meaning somebody had applied, and then they, it took a while for them to come. They actually ended up coming back on the site. And so I guess I'm just kind of wondering, if the deal falls through, how often does it, I guess people can just keep going back to the site to see if that's what is there, right? We're asking people to just go back to see if the deal falls through, you're gonna put it back up. Or are you gonna put it back up, or you're just gonna put it back to the second person who may have applied?
No, we haven't done that in terms of going to if there is a second person, we haven't looked at that. They typically would go back up. For that. There are a couple instances where we've pulled it down because it was, and we've said this very clearly and disclosed this in multiple different components, that sometimes something ends up on there that, shouldn't be up there.
Right.
And, so sometimes it might be that it comes off, and I would just advise anybody that has any questions about a specific property, just to ask us about those properties or that property, and we can also gauge and let people know where it is. And is it in this nebulous world that it came off because it shouldn't be there, or is it in a process and that process is moving forward, et cetera. So we'll also talk to the team. I'll talk to the team to see how we can also look at some process improvements in order to kind of show some of those transaction steps and where that is.
Okay, I'll get you some of those specifics so that we can go through those. I have 4 more questions.
So I have a couple questions as well. In the interest of time, because it is around 5:30, if we can just be as concise as possible in our remarks and our questions, I think that would be appropriate. My next question has to deal with permitting, the permitting working group and delays. Where are we in the status of that working group, and when can we have final recommendations submitted to the council?
The working.
Yeah, so following up on that, so I know there was a hearing. However, there were still many questions from that hearing related to additional questions and kind of pressure pain points within the permitting process. During the hearing, it was talked about that it was going to be a website with a streamlined permitting process. Where are we in those recommendations?
Yeah, so that is actively being put together. There are daily meetings with the Acela team on implementation. They've been working through some of, in terms of implementing any major software integration system, some updates and changes. We have a little bit of a delay. We've noticed a tweak that needed to be made in terms of incorporating CodeMap properly. That just was approved at the Board of Estimates, so now we have to put that in there. I will say that we are moving forward on that implementation pathway, streamlining components. It's also, some of the things to highlight, it's gone from like 20 different types of applications to 5. There's improvements there that are definitely going. The staff today in the update meeting, we're putting together timelines and information on training, because that's the big thing on this. So there'll be updates, and we'll ask everybody to share it once we have those dates, for both live training classes for the public, as well as the video kind of training. We also talked about having a specific Spanish language training as well, knowing a large number of contractors in that space. So that is actively, and that training schedule will be put out. We think that trainings probably, off the top of my head, like wiggle room on it, trainings kind of with the holiday of the Christmas holiday, probably more late December, January for the trainings. And then that, go live shortly thereafter.
So like early February of 2025? Okay.
Which is on track. And we're, I would tell you this, I looked at Deputy Hessler's calendar 4 weeks ago, and 95% of Deputy Hessler's calendar for the week was all Acela permit processing improvement time blocks, either for meetings or actually working through the workflows and the tickets.
Okay. And my next question actually has to deal with streamlined, this kind of flows the same, streamlined process for housing units in production. So a centralized housing pipeline report accessible to the public. Has there been discussions of that, and when will it be available?
There have been, and the team is working on, I know that we're working on how best to report on the unit production and a dashboard and tracking that. That's something that we've been looking at. One of the key things is that we have really great data on what we subsidize in terms of housing units. And the permit software actually will help us start to try to be able to track units that we don't subsidize. So I would say that that's kind of a calendar year 2025 type of situation.
So it's an in parallel process, so somewhere around about first quarter 2025?
I would say that would be a little bit longer than that, just trying to capture all the different components.
So about summer?
Maybe
midsummer.
Midsummer, mid-calendar 22, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. There you are, ma'am.
Thank you. I have more questions on the permit office, but I think we have scheduled a hearing for the 27th to go into detail, so I will wait on that and go on to those questions. I had a question about the criteria that I'm hearing, and I had never heard this before, and I was the director of One House at a Time way long ago. That one of the things that's being used as a criteria for bidding is having no VBNs. And I think that, sure, we want to make sure that nobody's holding on to VBNs that's bidding, but at the same time, if people are getting properties, that they may have to be a bidder that has some VBNs. And so the criteria should really be track record of getting stuff done and not whether or not they have one or more VBNs. What I worry about is that all these LLCs are going to come in from all different places, or it's one person that creates all these LLCs, because we can do single member LLCs in Maryland, that doesn't have any track record and they don't have any VBNs. So I don't think you're doing that for the buying to be more. I'm really sure about that because we've talked about it. But I'm hearing that this, and I will ask Pia as well, but I wanted to just see if you had heard about this and what has been some of the conversations.
I'll follow up with Pia and ask. I don't believe so, because I know of one entity that got properties at auction that does have other VBNs. So I would need to ask Pia.
Yeah, and I don't want people to hold on to properties. I just, again, with site assembly, that's one of the ways that they could be able to assemble properties if they were doing that. So I'll check in with her as well. My next question doesn't have to do with vacants. I'm glad about the HOPE program with the rental assistance. I think that's something also we talked about early on in the term. And, but you had mentioned you're thinking about doing a permanent supportive voucher type program, which I think is a great idea. The challenge will end up being just those continual costs over time, right? Because if somebody has that type of voucher, that's something that we have to pay for whenever, for the life of whenever that person is in that unit or wherever they go, because a voucher, if you're going to run it the same way as HABC, would end up being transferred. So I'm imagining that's coming into your calculations as to how something like that would end up working. I think it's a good idea. We need to have a local voucher program. I've always thought that that was the case. We just need to, make sure that we're, including all that in the calculation.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to answer that now. I'd want to wait to see what the reporting structure comes back from Enterprise and evaluate it. It has been a concern of mine in terms of a local voucher program and of the ongoing costs associated with it. And that's why when thinking about budget, the limited number of vouchers that we'd actually be able to produce out of the trust fund. But all of that will be evaluated and looked at once we get the consultant's report from Enterprise.
And what's the timeline on that?
I don't know.
So did you just get this start, did they just start the work?
They just started this.
Okay, so probably not till the end of next year, just given the timing of how they operate. But I'm glad that we're looking into it, because I do think it's something that we need to do, given the demand for affordable housing and the fact that people just can't get vouchers now because we just don't have enough. And then I just have one last question.
No worries, I have one more question as well, so you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
The comp plan, the comprehensive housing plan, I attended the session at Poly. I was super late, but I was glad to be there, and very impressed, obviously, with the work that you're doing with the consultant who's working on the Spanish-speaking side of things. I know her very well, so I knew she would do a good job. And I was curious, you've had 2 town halls. Will you be doing 2 more town halls? What is the next step and the deadlines that you're working towards?
Yes, of course. Thank you for the question. Kimberly Rubens, Chief of Policy and Research for DHCD and the lead for the citywide housing plan. We're using citywide, not comprehensive, just.
Oh, I'm totally
no, it's
mixed
okay.
it up, so,
just to
yeah,
be, make sure
Just
we're
to
not
distinguish
from the Department of Planning's efforts.
Yep.
So in terms of our stakeholder engagement process, we have completed to date 8 focus groups with another 2 to be scheduled, 1 on disability housing and 1 on financing. In addition, we will also be doing 2 virtual focus groups. Those will be invite only based on, housing expertise, people that we work with in the housing space. In addition to the 2 town halls that we have hosted, we will be hosting a town hall during the public comment period that is tentatively scheduled for a 30-day public comment period in Q1 of 2025, with the final plan being released after we have synthesized public comments from that period. In addition to all of that stakeholder engagement, we also have currently an electronic survey available in both English and Spanish. So I'll do a plug for that right now. If you go to bit.ly/DHCD, all capital housing, capital H, survey, capital S, you can access that survey. And we have QR codes, and we'll be doing mailers and some targeted outreach to our Hispanic community. And we have a goal of 2,600 respondents to be statistically significant at a 99% confidence interval for the population for the city of Baltimore. We're also doing regular check-ins to make sure we're geographically distributed, racially and ethnically distributed, age. We collect some demographics at the end of the survey, so we're making sure that we are equitable and reflective of the city's demographics as we're doing this housing survey. And I will also add that there are different channels for the survey based on whether or not you're a homeowner, whether you're a renter, whether you live in the city, whether you don't, because we know that there are people who are still connected to this city and maybe want to move to this city, and we ask questions about, what would be reasons why or why not you would move to the city based on certain variables anyways. And Then we also have an advisory committee that meets on a monthly basis. They will be meeting through the end of February. There are 30 members comprised of business leaders, housing finance experts, small developers, community stakeholders like Healthcare for the Homeless. The LEDC is a part of the advisory committee, as well as a number of city agencies. So we're making sure that MOHS, MOCFS, MEMA, MONSE, other agencies that interact with housing are part of that advisory committee. So that's all of the stakeholder engagement process. In terms of the actual drafting of the plan, we have to date completed a landscape analysis of what is the ecosystem of housing development in Baltimore City, as well as a program we're finalizing a program analysis of what are the existing housing programs that Baltimore City offers, what are those funding sources, who's being served, and doing an analysis through a matrix developed by the consultant team. Again, all of that will be publicly available when the draft plan is released. And then from there, we'll move into housing goal production based on population projections. That will be completed by the Housing Initiative at Penn. That's one of the subcontractors on the consultant team. So that's HIP, led by Professor Vincent Reyna, who just returned from a stint as a senior advisor at the White House for housing policy. And then after that, housing and market analysis, and then finally recommendations and goal setting. So I rambled a little bit, but I'm deep in the weeds. So I hope that answers
so that
your
Marguerite has the
questions.
notes. If you don't mind putting that in a memo form for us, that would.
Yeah, I mean, there's a scope of work that's in the BOE contract that I can share that outlines all of these subtasks that will be completed by the consultant team that I'm happy to share.
And so we're looking at so the draft will be released sometime in first quarter of the calendar year.
Yes.
And then there'll be a 30-day period where there will be another town hall.
Yes.
And then you'll compile all the comments.
Synthesize, adopt recommendations based on how it aligns with, the data that both qualitative and quantitative data that we've synthesized, both from our research findings and our stakeholder engagement findings that we're gathering right now. Synthesize that, incorporate it into the final plan, release the final plan, and then hold a final town hall to present on the final plan. Okay. And that will be, I'm going to say end of Q1, of 2025 conservatively.
In terms, I thought that maybe if you were doing the draft release, the 30-day, that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it, okay. And then are we, I just want to make sure that I think it's great that we're doing a landscape analysis and also a program analysis, as well as really looking at what are our goals. And I think I've said this to you and I've said it publicly, it would be really amazing if this plan also has a vision of where we're headed and how we're going to measure that we get there.
Oh, of course, yes.
Yeah.
There's going to be 3 North Star principles, and then some under each of those 3 North Star principles, there will be a one KPI and then sub KPIs. And then there will be specific production and preservation goals based on income levels, based on population projections and what we're seeing in the housing market. It will, as I have said, as I've presented on this numerous times at this point, I want this to be concrete, measurable, actionable. And so one of the tensions that will exist in this plan is that this plan will be focused on goals that DHCD as an agency can control. And so, of course, there are complementary goals that we have as a city around workforce development, around transportation. Those, of course, we will work with our partner agencies, but those aren't goals necessarily that DHCD has final say over. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that we're putting a plan together where agreed that DHCD, this is a housing plan, but there are so many partners that need to be brought together and that are already working on this that should be also following this North Star and operating relative to accomplishing that goal and not just their own, so that we're all singing from the same song. So it's not DHCD's strategic plan. It is the city's housing plan.
That's why it's called the citywide housing plan. It's really spearheaded by, the Scott administration, but will live beyond him because it's a 15-year housing plan, right? And I think we're totally in sync when it comes to that, what you're talking about as singing from the same sheet, because what we'd really like to see as a city is that all of our decisions across the board, whether they're being made in City Hall, at DHCD, or in funding rooms outside of these walls, being made under these North Star principles, right? Like, so that we're not just plugging holes in different areas.
So then the part about whether or not that's going to be, that it's focused on what DHCD can do is not that it's focused on what DHCD can do. There are going to be strategies that will be DHCD focused, but there should be some strategies around, what we're asking other partners to do as well.
Yes, of course, that makes sense, but that it's that it's a housing plan and that we want to make sure. Yeah, of course. I think we're saying the same thing.
I think you all are saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. The last question I wanted to follow up on, we have quite a few homes that need to be demolished in the city, particularly all across the city. What is your plan regarding the demolition of those houses, mainly those that are structurally unsound? And if funding is an issue, how are we leveraging state and federal funds to bring back into the city for those demolition costs?
Yeah, so demolition is one of the budget line items that we work on with the state under Reinvest Baltimore. Plus, we also have our own city-funded demolition plans. A number of the communities, we are still working with some of the communities on identifying properties for demolition versus stabilization versus renovation. And one of the highest concentration areas, we're in the planning process now. It's one of our community asset building neighborhoods, so outside of the impact investment areas where we'll be doing planning where we believe there will be more demolition because of just the concentration of vacant properties. In terms of anything that is an emergency demolition, we will address an emergency demolition immediately. There isn't a funding issue. Like, it's not like something's an emergency and we just let it stay there. We take care of those immediately.
And let me just caveat, I think the threshold for the emergency may be a little high. What I'm talking about is, are homes that are literally on their last leg. What is that timeline of evaluation what is that timeline for evaluation towards demolition?
It depends on it depends on part of where the property is located and what the end goal is. And if there's been a statement and plan as part of a community plan that is a block that's stated for redevelopment, then we would be looking at doing stabilization on that property, not demolition.
So for example, 2100 Annapolis Road has been a problem property for some time now. We've been waiting at least 8 to 9 months for demolition, or at least some sort of conversation about demolition of those properties.
I need to go back and check my notes on that address, but it's one that we've been talking about with the community. I just need to go back and check the notes on that one.
Sure. Another one is 1119 Ward Street. So that's one that I personally worked on, and we've been waiting for some time for demolition. The reason why I'm bringing up demolition, particularly as we approach the winter months, is that we know that persons experiencing homelessness are going to be going into these homes, and what I fear is that we're going to have more fires, particularly in some of these vacant homes that should have been demolished, and we have not created a sense of urgency for those homes to be demolished.
I would say that this is where I might counter the word should, because we're working also off of community plans where community has stated in specific areas where they don't want to see demolition. So they want to see the other components of stabilization.
Sure.
Or renovation and demolition. So.
But I would also counter that there are known properties that communities have shared that they wanted to be demolished.
And
they
those.
haven't.
And they have not, and those are strictly in the past. If they are ones that they have not, it is also a funding issue on a regular, for planned demolition like that, it is limited funds on a yearly basis.
Thank you for that. And so what is your plan for those? What is your plan for those limited funding?
Well, that's where we have more funding coming in from the state for demolition under Reinvest Baltimore. So that also helps augment the funding for demolition as well.
And what's the ETA on that funding coming back into the city?
We're waiting to hear from them now on what kind of final decisions will be. So we hope to have that in the next month.
What if that plan falls through?
Then we would need to be putting additional funding for demolition in the CIP budget, which we did increase and have looked at for CIP. And then also that's where some of the other funding sources related to vacant reduction come into play.
Is there a plan from DHCD related to demolition?
There is, because it's part of our block level planning. So the demolition, the properties that would be in a demolition pipeline come out of the block level planning with communities, or our community, our quarterly, either our monthly or our quarterly meetings with the communities and what is stated on the block level planning.
Okay. Thank you. We have one question from the chat is, will members of the Inclusionary Housing Coalition be invited to participate in the private meetings for subject matter experts?
I think they already. Oh, yeah. So a number of members of the Inclusionary Housing Coalition have been in focus groups, different focus groups.
Okay.
And, you know, the housing plan, you know, we'll look at market rate units, you know, different AMI percentages. And, you know, just a reminder that inclusionary housing units are tied directly to the creation of market rate developments.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, ma'am? All right. Hearing no more questions, this hearing is in recess. Thank you all.